Welcome into this episode and week of Dynasty After Party with myself and Joel Wirth here at Club Fantasy FFL. We have a doozy. We have a doozy coming up for you today. We have the Combine kicking off, and that is Dynasty Jet Fuel for all of us here as we look forward to our rookie drafts. We're going to be breaking down what we want to see, what we think we'll see at the Combine this week, go through all those amazing fan favorite names, and so forth. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the intro. Well, Joel, we made it. We made it. It feels like the few weeks between the Super Bowl and the Combine are, we have the Senior Bowl, but we're back. We're back. We're into the Dynasty offseason, the full swing of it. It goes Combine right into free agency, and then we're off to the races to the draft. So how you doing this morning, Joel? How's it going?
Good. Yeah, there is no off season. They've done a good job of taking that away. So, the only downtime is like June, right? That's it. Once you get done with the mini camps, June, early July. Yeah, terrible. You get like that 6 weeks between the end of mini camps and when the training camps start. And that's it. So everything else is kind of live. So we're fired right back into it.
Those 6 weeks are too long for us to be without football. It's really special when you really break it down like that. Which is
2023 is long over.
Yeah. So we'll be jumping into all that good stuff in the coming months, but this coming week we do have the Combine, Joel. Which let's start off with a basic question here: how much do you care about the Combine? Because a lot of people have mixed opinions of it. Some people write it off. Some people value it very much, and some people look for very specific drills and metrics to care about. So, on a basic overarching question, what are your thoughts on the Combine?
It is important if you value it for what it is, which is kind of the ability for teams to kind of confirm or put into question what they see on tape. So I kind of get annoyed by that people like on Twitter who will say, oh, it's the Underwear Olympics and blah, blah, blah. And nobody is going into the Combine and saying what happened on film doesn't matter. That doesn't happen. Right. So there are specific, and another big problem is kind of like the 40 is the only kind of television friendly thing that's going to happen at the Combine, right? Nothing else is interesting, but
I guess, yeah.
Right. I mean, the other stuff is just as important. Like the 40 matters for a few positions and mostly at the outliers, right? It doesn't matter, if a receiver runs a 4.4 or a 4.5 or a 4.45 or a 4.46, that doesn't matter. If someone runs, like we'll talk about like Neighbors, is he going to run a 4.3? Is he going to run a 4.32? Is he going to run a 4.35? Is he going to run a 4.4? That matters, right? It's the extremes that matter for the most part, and everything has to be put into context. And like the measurements matter, but nobody cares about that. Nobody's going to watch that on TV, but that's really important. Like we'll talk about like later when we'll talk about a few defensive players. We'll talk about Nate Wiggins. That dude is skinny as hell. I want to see what he weighs. That's really important because it's going to matter. We'll talk about that later, but yeah, you have to put everything into context, and like different teams are going to look at different things. So ultimately it doesn't matter what you think about it. It's what the teams think about it, and it's important.
Yeah, the one thing I always like seeing is the real measurements, like you were just saying, right? Because we have bloated and undercut college figures based on whatever would help their narrative for their draft stock, and the Combine kind of for in one way or another, at least for this 1 week in February, we get to know exactly what they weigh and exactly how tall they are. So we get accurate measurements. And as for the spreadsheet film watching people that we are, it helps. It helps to know for sure that this guy is 5'7" versus listed 6'3". So it's always nice to see. But before we jump into full Combine, and we're going to do all that in a second, Joel, you brought up a fantastic headline for us, and headlining our segment here, salary cap. T-Swizzle raising the bar for the NFL this season. Salary cap is expected to jump by $30 million or more. So I know you have some thoughts about how that impacts how teams are going to view this free agency cycle, how they're viewing how they pay their players, and ultimately how it affects our dynasty rosters.
Yeah, so let's big picture, like this is seismic, right? This is huge. And
30 million is a
we
lot.
saw this coming. We saw a big shift coming because of like the media contracts, right? And this is the result of a playoff game being on Peacock and Thursday Night Football being streaming on Prime. People bitch about that, but this is a result of that. And that's a good thing. The players getting paid is a good thing. It's always a good thing. So there's going to be some residual effects from this, right? And I put a few of them on Twitter the other day when this was announced. One is that you are going to see a lot of teams, any team that has kind of a player that they want to keep that's at the franchise tag price is going to be kept on the franchise tag. Teams are going to be falling all over themselves to use the franchise tag because the tag is now completely unaligned with the market, right? And yes, there is a kind of salary cap component, like an escalator, that's going to get priced into the franchise tag price. But big picture, you put $1 billion of extra salary potential spending into the marketplace. You've made it taller, right? There's more money to spend, but you've also made it wider because you've made a lot of teams that didn't think they would have money to spend. Now they're back into the pool, right? They can go spend money that they didn't think they had. Now, not everyone's going to spend this on like free agents, right? Some teams are going to use that to say, okay, we've got some bad contracts coming up. Let's just eat those costs right now and then get ourselves into a better place for 25 or 26, whatever. There's some teams that are so far over the cap that doesn't matter. Saints, Bills, like this helps, but they've still got some tough cuts to make to get under the cap. But there's probably a dozen teams that didn't think that they were going to be major players in free agency or the offseason that are in play now.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's a significant jump. It's a 14% increase, which, according to CBS, which it's basic mathematics. I probably don't need to attribute it, but it's the largest jump in a non-COVID year for the NFL since 2006, when it was 85 million to 102 million. Now we're talking $255 million in cap space. So we'll see where that ends up leading. But you're dead on, because it impacts the people on the tags, but it's also a huge W for this running back market, right?
Sure.
It is a loaded group, but we've seen loaded running back classes before. Doesn't mean they pan out, but a 30 million increase in cap allows a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more spending, and like you said, it could just be spent on in-house guys. But that 30 million could be the difference of the Giants bringing him back or not, of the Texans, which I've seen rumored as a landing spot, splurging for Saquon, or the Chargers splurging for Saquon. So it's a good thing ultimately, because it means more opportunities and less people on prove-it deals, because hopefully there's more money to go around. But like you mentioned, more people being tagged, and one of them was wide receiver T. Higgins of the Bengals, who got tagged the other day for around, I believe it was $21 million. So we'll see if they hammer out an extension. Yeah, I assume we're kind of putting trade off the table, but I'm curious on whether you think that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I expected them to tag him the whole time anyway. I don't think they're going to sign him to a long-term deal, but 1 year, $21 million is not extravagant by any means. When you look at like Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, those guys are making 30 mil. So what's Mike Evans, who's on the other side of 30, is going to make probably that much, at least, right? Over a couple of years. Yeah. I mean, he was expecting probably a couple of years, like 2 years, 22, 2 years, 21, something like that, before the cap skyrocketed. I mean, I could see Mike Evans getting 25 mil a year for a couple of years now. So yeah, 21 million a year for Higgins is that's a relative bargain at this point, right? And that's kind of the point we're trying to make, is the franchise tag is now, it's cheap relatively to what these guys are going to make on the free market.
Yeah, the tag puts T. Higgins as the 9th highest paid wide receiver in terms of money over a year, and free agency hasn't started yet. Like you said, Mike Evans will almost certainly surpass that number, maybe over on a short span. But I mean, T. Higgins on a 1 year deal, so yeah, it's a free shot at running back with T. Higgins before you ultimately let him walk, like you said. Or maybe you could hammer out a team-friendly extension if T. Higgins feels compelled to stay on the rising ship in Cincinnati, or perceived rising ship in Cincinnati. So we'll obviously be tracking how that goes and so forth. But without further ado,
one thing before we move on,
go for it.
This is how this affects your dynasty teams. I don't know if we're there yet, but we're going to get to a point where teams are going to start questioning how much they want to spend on payroll. Right? We're going to get to kind of the small market baseball where owners are kind of complaining about how much they have to spend. It's a losing argument, but they're going to kind of make it. So they're not going to want to spend all this money on players, but they're going to have to. So how does this affect the coaching market and coaching salaries? I still think they're going to get paid, but I think you're going to see a lot less guys get fired with like more than a year on their contract. It's like the Eberflus thing. Like we were just assuming that he was going to get fired early in the season. I don't think that's going to happen very often, right? Because coaches they're not going to want to pay coaches. Owners are not going to want to pay coaches on top of having to pay all this $250 million in player salaries. They're also really not going to want to pay coaches to not coach for them. So I think this is going to be a case where like bad teams stay bad and good teams stay good. And like the salary cap's going to kind of exacerbate that because all the teams that thought they had a big advantage going into this offseason, like the Bears, the Commanders, the Giants, teams that had a bunch of salary to spend, now they've got even more salary to spend, but even less. Now they've got more competition on how they want to spend it. So now, they've got more desirable teams for free agents to go to. So now the advantage of having extra money to just throw to these players is gone. So I think the big point is here, good teams are going to stay good, bad teams are going to stay bad.
See, I think it all still comes down to just your selling points. And money's one of those selling points, right? If you could offer more than someone else, that could be the tempting thing. And that's something still teams like the Bears and teams like the Commanders can offer. But ultimately, why that competition that you mentioned, why them, other teams getting the mix matters, even if they have less money to offer, is because they have a Patrick Mahomes to offer. They have a Josh Allen to offer. They have a Joe Burrow to offer. They have Nick Bosa's to offer. There's plenty of talent that attracts someone over there for the chance to win a ring. Now, bad teams are only as bad until they happen to find that gem in the rough. If the Commanders trade up to 1 and get Caleb Williams, they will be a hot commodity next year, even if they're terrible next season. And same idea with maybe Drake May with the Patriots or something like that. A terrible situation, but if Drake May shows that he could be the guy, things change. So I think ultimately the draft is still a nice way of evening things out, especially with, a non-NBA lottery system, which I can't stand. Good to see you, Carrington, this morning. Oh, happy to have you in the chat. But I'm not going to jump to that extreme yet, because hell, the Browns are now kind of a perennial playoff team. They were the laughingstock of the league for decades. It ultimately just comes down to the team owners. I think we get to see a little bit more about what their mindset is that we didn't have to know in the past because those limits were set a little bit lower. So we'll see how people are dedicated to their teams. And I tend to think that most owners are the football teams are like their baby, their baby. They got their companies and all, but football teams are their public, the way they announce their public legacy in a way. Is that wrong?
I don't think it's wrong. I think I fundamentally disagree with that in most cases, because in most cases owners are old rich white guys, and those guys don't like to spend money. They got true. They got rich by being
plaques and statues, and they get those by winning.
There are going to be guys like Jerry Jones who doesn't care and just wants to win and is going to spend as much as he feels he needs to. But I think those are pretty few and far between. I think most owners are going to be pretty tight-wadded about things.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the Josh Harris situation in Washington of a new owner coming in. This is his first head coaching hire obviously he didn't make the hire, but he has a large say in who he wants to be taking over in this direction after inheriting Ron Rivera and that kind of staff. So
But then you've got teams that have cash flow problems, like the Raiders. Not problems, but like the Raiders just had to pay a relocation fee to move to Vegas.
Yeah.
The Chargers are renting the Rams stadium, basically. They don't have their own stadium. So there are going to be teams that have cash flow issues that, like, I think at some point you're going to start, like, the cap's not going to go up $30 million next year. We know that. There were some fundamental, things. There was like a loan paid off from the COVID year that kind of came due that allowed this to be such a massive increase this year. But it's still going to go up, 10, 15 million, maybe 20 million next year. So now that you're up to, 275, approaching $300 million, these teams that have cash flow issues, it's going to be a problem for them.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, and really, it's tough to guess because we've never seen it this high. It's the highest it's ever been, obviously, because it continues to be. So it's very possible that people do get priced out in a way among the billionaires of billionaires, and we go the route of the MLB in a way. But we'll see, and we'll see. But Carrington asked a good question in the chat on the topic of the combine, which we're going to jump to right in a second. How are we feeling about JSN? He's seen a lot of buy now and sell now. What is his value? And given that we're talking combine, we're talking about someone coming off a rookie season, and ultimately a disappointing one at that, but also the same exact result that we kind of expected, given the Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf situation and Geno Smith being pressured on almost every play as well. But what are your thoughts on JSN?
So I think the cap increase applies here directly, right? Because I expected Tyler Lockett to be priced out of Seattle. Now they could bring him back if they wanted to. They could do a restructure if they wanted to. So that probably affects how many targets he's going to get. I still like JSN. I still like the talent. He showed me enough. Like, he wasn't a zero in his rookie year, right? He had some games, and that's all I want to see, right? I want to, especially in someone in that situation where you have other kind of alphas around you. I still think he needs a better quarterback, and that's probably not going to change since they kind of re-upped Geno Smith's contract. But at some point it's going to be his receiver room, and he's going to have a better quarterback. So I'm still in. I'm certainly not selling at any kind of a discount.
Yeah, and when you look at Seattle, there are a lot of ways that they can create even more cap space now that they have. With the $30 million to spend, they would have had to cut these guys to get to even. Now they can cut these guys and get to plus. By cutting, Will Dissly and saving $8 million. They restructured Geno the other day to save some more money. So, yeah, it's very possible that we could see Tyler Lockett back this year, and that doesn't mean that JSN can't overcome that. I think that's still very possible because I loved him as a prospect. I think people are panicking just because we didn't have a Puka Nacua season, but that was always unrealistic, in my opinion, of having the third receiver for the very balanced at best Seattle Seahawks. So, yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. It's an entirely different offense coming in a sense of we have a first-time play caller coming in. We have a new head coach who's never been a head coach before, and he's defensive-minded. So we'll see. And Carrington says she has no shares of him, but it would be wise to try to get, or was wondering if it's worth going out to get. What would you spend for JSN, Joel?
Like, I wouldn't try to do like a straight up for a pick because I don't think he's a reroll kind of guy. So I don't think you're going to kind of get the pick value. I'm like always, I'm going to try and get him as part of a pack. If I can get him as like a throw in and part of a bigger package, he's not a throw in, he's above that threshold, but
right.
If I can make a bigger package and get him at a slight discount on what was his draft capital, like 107, 106, something like that in rookie drafts last year. If I can get him at like a 108, 109 value, that's what I'm going to try. That's how I'm going to try and acquire him.
Yeah. And to try to give a pick for player value, which you and I both know is kind of unrealistic to how things actually work in the world. But I'd happily send the 110 straight up for him. I'd happily send, I think 108 is probably the highest I'd go. We've talked about on the show, but that's 7% cutoff, and then you start asking questions. And if I'm asking questions, I might as well ask him about my wide receiver one the year before. I'm curious on whether you agree with that assessment or not.
Like, I just wouldn't go that high just because I think you're going to get.
I don't think you need to.
Right.
That's as high as I'd be willing to go.
I mean, if you think about it, if like a Superflex plays out, the 3 quarterbacks, the 3 elite receivers, Brock Bowers, I think J.J. McCarthy is going to get top 10 draft capital. So I think he slots in there somewhere in the top 8. So I think the pick value slides out to 8. Once you get past, you've still got the guys like Troy Franklin and Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas Jr. Those are guys that people are going to like, right? There's going to be somebody in your league is going to like. I really like him. I don't want to move that pick now for like a JSN. But once we get on the clock and now it's 110 and the guys I like are kind of gone, that's when I could kind of see making that pick. Or making a pick for a player swap.
Yeah, and then maybe even get a 25 pick thrown in because someone really wants to
maybe can I get a tear down? Like, can I get a late second on top of that or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And then you kind of get the same price you were willing to pay a month before, but the hype for the rookie class just continues to grow and you capitalize off.
Let the hype build before you make that deal.
Yeah, so I'll be trying to make that deal myself at some point this offseason. I already started sending out my slimy Dynasty trade offers, which, were rejected and probably rightfully so. But we touched on the top of the show about what, whether we value the combine and our thoughts about that. But what do we actually want to see at the combine, Joel? I'm curious because we all have players that we like and we all have players that we don't like and we all have things we want to have confirmed. So I'm curious for you what some of those things are.
So it's position dependent, right? So for the most part, like quarterbacks, I don't care. Like, and I can go on my screed about like Anthony Richardson last year. Like, he was the greatest athlete in the history of the combine. Cool. We knew he was a great athlete. If that sways you, then you're double counting. So the fact that he went from a 98th percentile athlete to a 100th percentile athlete doesn't matter. It doesn't tell you anything that you didn't already know. So and then kind of after that, we saw him working out with, personal quarterback coach. That tells me that he acknowledges that there's things he needs to work on. That's far more important to me than him blowing up the combine. So quarterbacks don't matter too much. Like, I don't care about a quarterback's 100 or 40 time. It doesn't matter. I couldn't care less. There are some things I want to see, like Drake May. I want to see his height and weight because I don't buy what he's
a big boy.
He's listed like 6'4".
I'll pull it up right now.
I don't think he's that big. I just don't. I mean, he looks like a kid. So I want to see what he kind of weighs in at or how tall he is. I want to see his actual measurements. But other than that, I don't care much about what quarterbacks do at the combine.
Yeah, I see roughly 6'4", 230 for Drake May, which I distinctly remember because every time I look it up, it feels a little bit bigger than I thought he was.
Yeah, I don't think he's 6'4". I don't think he's 230.
Yes, we'll see.
Does that matter? Like, I mean, how much does that matter? Like, he's bigger than Jane Daniels. Okay, so
6'2", 6'4", I frankly don't care.
But I do not think he's 6'4", and I don't think he's 230. No. So everybody's comparing him to Justin Herbert. He's not that big. He's just not.
He can't. He can't be as tall as Justin Herbert. No way.
No,
he's not built like Justin Herbert. But we'll see. Either way, that all comes back to those measurements.
But I want to see. Maybe he is, and if he is, that changes my evaluation because I'm not as high on Drake May as the market is. If he is that big, then maybe I need to relook at it.
And another thing that people aren't high on relative to the market is really the whole running back class. And I have seen some steam of the last week pick up in that sense of people trying to pick their favorites. And honestly, I kind of think some of it is just people trying to find their star in the rough. And everyone is so passionate about their gem in the rough, their needle in the haystack, so to say. And we talked about the running back class last week. What? Sorry.
I was first.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this show isn't about bragging.
No. I mean, that's what people are looking for, right? It's like they want to be the one that people say, "I was the first on player X."
Yeah. Oh, I thought you were. I thought you were saying I was the first to say the running back classes and all that.
No.
No. Yes, you were right. Yes, that everyone is trying to say that they were the first. Like when I tweeted one thing about how much I like Puka Nacua after the Senior Bowl, which now makes me the first person to be right about Puka Nacua. So
You were.
everyone wants to be
Full credit on that one. That was you.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I still had him too low. But my point in saying this is that we're all trying to find it. But if I'm looking at running backs, there is actually a combine metric I value quite a bit. I maybe even too much. I care about the broad jump a lot. I really do, for the broad jump for running backs, because I really think it's a big testament to explosiveness. And when I pair that with the vertical and kind of try to see what that spark score is going to end up being. And I think that's what I don't care about the 40 time for running backs. I don't care about the weight for running backs. I just the weightlifting, the bench press for running backs. But I really like looking at those, the broad jump and vertical. I think it's a big testament to burst, and I'm curious on your thoughts about that, because it feels somewhat conflicting of whether people actually attribute that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, it's a case where you brought up the 40 time. It matters at the margins, right? It matters that Devon Achane was 4.3, because if he wasn't, it was going to be a problem, right? Because we expected him to be super fast, and he was. So it confirmed our expectation. If he'd run a 4.4, now, oh shit, now he's small and he's not as fast as we think he is. Now we got to move him down. So it, like I say, it matters at the extremes. For the most part, the middle of the bell curve, it doesn't matter at all. But yes, the broad jump, the high jump, the shuttles, 3-cone, and stuff like that matters. The over, like the RAS score, that stuff matters for running backs. I think weight matters, because
we get the true BMI.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Blake Corum. That's going to be a problem, right? I mean, there's some people who love him, some people who don't. He's small. If he comes in at 5'6", 180, that's a problem.
Yeah, he's somebody that I haven't quite dove into all of it yet, but I think I'm going to like him. But we'll see. And again, like you said, it really comes down to, I'm really curious about what his measurements are going to be. But if you look at some of the broad jump leaders from last year, the leader of which, hasn't really panned out, Chase Brown, but is still kind of a dynasty sleeper for a lot of people. But behind him are guys like Tyjae Spears, who I love quite a bit. You didn't, but is currently being valued as the RB14. Obviously, Bijan Robinson is a great prospect. Evan Hull was nearby, but not really that high. And a diamond in the rough with the second best broad jump of 10.6, Keaton Mitchell, somebody that went diamond in the rough, and if he has anything, it's burst. And he is.
But still went undrafted.
What?
Still went undrafted.
Yeah, I know, and that's what I'm saying. And he still proved to be a name that we should have stashed. If people stashed him from the summer to where he ended up, you improved on your value, even with him snapping his leg, which is terrible. And hopefully he gets a full recovery from that. But I almost sent an offer out for him yesterday. I really want to. I just don't. It's so. It goes against every bone in my body, Joel, to send offers for running backs in February. But I keep on going for them. I almost made an offer for ETN. I almost made one for Saquon. I almost made one for Keaton Mitchell, and I feel like I keep making mistakes.
I don't like doing that either. But if you can get those guys at a discount, then because everyone else is trying to sell running backs, then sure.
Yeah, no, they didn't want my.
I bought Kyron. Like we said, we went over my trade for Kyron Williams a couple weeks ago. I got him for 2 seconds and a third. That's nothing. So,
I offered.
Yeah, I'm buying him for that price. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it if you're going to give them to me for nothing.
Yeah, well, I guess I was low. I was low blown as well. It's just testing the market. No one can blame me for feeling the waters once in a while. Sure. Although it's probably poor, but. Either way, you mentioned Drake May, and now we talked about running backs a little bit. And you mentioned Blake Corum, but a lot of other guys in this class and a lot of question marks we get to see. You mentioned Jalen, or I know you want to talk about Jalen Wright, Jonathan Brooks, Dylan Johnson. Just a lot of guys that there's so much unknown in this class that their stocks can go wildly up or wildly down, and that's something we're going to fully see over the next week. Yeah,
so a couple guys like you mentioned, Jalen Wright, running back from Tennessee, kind of split the backfield in a kind of pass heavy offense. He's a guy a lot of people like. I think he's like the kind of running back who could, quote, blow up the combine, right? He's super athletic. So we'll see. And again, he probably needs to kind of kick his draft stock up into like day 2, but not unlikely outcome. Jonathan Brooks is like my running back 1 in this class, but obviously coming off a late season ACL. So, we probably won't get real information on his medicals. There probably isn't any real information, right? ACLs come, right? Recovery times are all over the board. So even if we get something, like a couple of years ago, Jameson Williams went into the combine saying, "Oh, I'm ahead of schedule, and didn't show up until December, if that. So I would like to hear positive info, but I'm not really expecting to. And then Dylan Johnson from Washington, it's the kind of guy I really liked, just watching Washington because they were in the spotlight a lot. They had a lot of big games, obviously made the playoffs, made the national championship game. He was just a guy, just kind of always got it done. I don't think he's going to test super well, but I think he's a really good player. So I want to see, maybe he does test better than I think.
Yeah, and when we talk about Jalen Wright, like you said before, I know you're just talking about Dylan Johnson, but that's someone that I'm very excited to see how he does as well. Because I'm trying to do my draft research, and he's obviously, Tennessee has had plenty of 1,000-yard rushers, but he's the first to do it on as few carries as he had, which I believe was around 137 or so. He's explosive, and yet he's not tiny, and that's really an interesting duo that we don't get to see too often of. In college, those guys get a ton of touches. They get a lot of carries, and maybe they don't get used in other ways. But when you see someone get 7 yards per pop, when he's getting the ball, it's a lot. To me, it feels like there's a lot of untapped ability there, but we'll have to wait and see. And like you said, there's Jonathan Brooks is your RB1, but there is no there's no consensus. I've heard 7 different people tell me who their RB1 is, and of which I've heard a lot about Braelon Allen, Audric Estime, the latter of which I don't love, but I've seen a lot of good talk about them. But I'm curious on your take on those two guys, given their kind of high profile status. I think that's a large part of it, of people knew their names before the season.
Yeah. Braelon Allen, I'll say this. I like him a lot. I'm a Badger fan, so I've seen him a lot. I like him a lot. He is crazy young, right? He played his entire freshman season, his true freshman season at 17. He will not turn 21. He can't buy a beer until like the NFC Championship game of the 2025 playoffs, right? He's going to play his entire rookie year at 20 years old. He was a linebacker at Fond du Lac High School until like his senior season. So he doesn't understand the nuance maybe of the position yet. So you're really betting on the come with. He's a good player now, but like there's a huge untapped ceiling with him just because how young he is, how little experience he has at that position. So I think he could be like a Javonte Williams kind of hype guy that, we all loved him because he was crazy young and, really talented. So I think there's that kind of ceiling for him. Audric Estime I like as a runner. I think he's kind of AJ Dillon, right? He's not involved in the passing game at all. He's a big guy. If his ceiling is better, AJ Dillon, how valuable is that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I don't think he's a plotter. I mean, he's athletic, but I
think his ceiling is a Jamal Williams, and even then Jamal Williams is a better third down guy than
Jamal Williams is a better pass catcher. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably not the best comp, but either way, it'll be very interesting to watch how the running back market shifts over the next week, because like you said, we don't have a consensus. So we'll see if one kind of pulls themselves out of the bunch. Do you have a guess on if anyone's going to be the highest riser of running backs? Who would it be?
Well, and this is where the combine matters, right? Because we've talked, there's not going to be a running back going round 1. If there is one in round 2, it's late, like really late, probably like into the 50s, the almost 60s, late 50s, 60s. Yeah. So yeah, who comes out of this class? Who comes out of the combine as the big riser? They could move themselves into like from day 3 guy to a day 2 guy who, like, you could legitimately have like anyone who blows up the combine just be RB1. that could happen. So
Yeah.
I think Jalen Wright, like we talked about, has the athleticism to kind of, I think right now he's probably a early day three pick. I think you could see him moving up to, that kind of quasi RB1. If Blake Corum measures better than we expect, if he's actually like 5'9", 190, or if he can come to the combine with some weight on him and he can test well. Because remember Bryce Young last year, right? We had questions about his weight and then he showed up at like 200 pounds.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you put on combine weight. Great. It doesn't. So
I-
you've got to have the weight and you've got to test well. So, but yeah, I could see him. Like, I'm not a huge fan of him as a player, but if he, if
it provides
there are a lot of people who
question you have.
There are a lot of people who are. So I'm willing to be wrong, and I'd be more willing to be wrong if he's kind of bigger than I think he is.
Yeah, and on the flip side of it as well, if we don't see someone pull away and we don't see someone stand out, doesn't mean that default is someone's still going to go in round 2, because running back, there's always someone who goes in round 2. That's a good thing for the free agency class that we were talking about. It's a great free agency class. So if teams don't feel confident in this running back class, no one separates themselves over the combine week. Teams have to make a call for agency before they get their name called on the draft. So maybe that means. Yeah, it means it's a good thing for Saquon Barkley, of whether, Jim Harbaugh wants to pair Blake Corum with him in the 3rd round or in the 2nd round. Oh my God, could you imagine? Oh, Justin Herbert being a game manager with Saquon Barkley and Blake Corum. Oh, what a terrible world we could be living in. But listen, we talked about quarterbacks, we talked about running backs, one of which is great in the class and one of which is not. Let's get back on the great side here with the wide receiver group. So Malik Neighbors, you talked about him at the top of the show. You're valuing his 40 time, it seems like, quite a bit.
Yeah, so we went back. You put a post on Twitter the other day about how much you liked him.
He's awesome.
He is. So here's my take on Neighbors. I comped him to like a taller Tyreek Hill, and here's why. You can see, like, what makes Tyreek Hill special is not just the 40 time, it's not just the long speed. It's also, I mean, it's insane at like, what is he, 4.22 or 4.24, whatever he ran. That's like standard deviations outside that bell curve. That's crazy. It's also the acceleration, right? Because he can get in and out of his breaks. He can slow down and speed up. He can get to his top speed as fast as anyone in the league, maybe ever. I see that with Malik Neighbors. I see that kind of acceleration. I mean, the dude's a Ferrari. He's got like 11 gears.
He's a Maserati.
He's a Maserati.
That's Marv.
Maserati.
Maserati Marv. I'm mixing up the nicknames. Go on.
He can, like, I don't remember seeing a receiver with his kind of pedigree and his talent get so wide open at the college level. I mean, you watch his film and you just, how is that guy that wide open? Because he lulls guys to sleep, right? You see him cruising and all of a sudden he just pushes it into another gear and he's gone and you cannot keep up with that. So I see that acceleration. If he can marry that with like kind of an elite 40 time, like a low 4.3, now I can see an argument that I'm not saying he's 1B with Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison is super special, but he's right there. Now you make the argument that he could be, depending on preference, maybe he goes ahead of Marvin Harrison just because he could be that kind of special.
I found myself writing very similar prose with Marvin Harrison as I did with Malik Neighbors in terms of their ability. And while I'm not saying they're the same player. I think Marvin is a far more nuanced route runner. Not that Malik Neighbors is a bad one in the slightest. Yeah. But it's like you said, he is way too big to be as quick and as good as he is after the catch. He knows where he is on the field, and all those things we're not going to see in the combine. Right? We're not going to see him have spatial awareness in an 11-on-11 drill and then rip it off field like he did for LSU. But I am curious to see his 10-yard split, because I think that'll be a very ultimately the 40 time. I think it's a very public metric, but the 10, 20-yard splits of the 40 time, that's what measures that acceleration. That's what measures how quick you can get to that speed. So how that stacks up in the class will be very telling, because it will probably be one of the better ones in the class, despite him being one of the biggest receivers in the class. He's awesome. He really is awesome. And I genuinely did not believe that I thought it was people reaching with the Marvin Harrison 1B situation of Malik Neighbors being there, but it's not. He's the real deal. He'll be a top 10 pick for a reason. And frankly, I see I like Rome Odunze, but I see a considerable tier difference between those top two and him, which is why I'm fine calling him a 1B, because I view Malik Neighbors as a much better prospect than Rome Odunze.
Yeah, it's almost unfair to say that
anti-Odunze either.
Yeah, it's unfair to say Odunze is in a different tier, but like we talked about a couple weeks ago, Odunze would be the number one prospect in the last 3 drafts, wide receiver prospect, easily, kind of. Going back to Jamar Chase, he would be a better prospect than anyone in the 22 class. He was a better prospect than Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams, Drake London. He's a Chris Olave. He's a better prospect than any of those guys. So to say he's in a different tier,
I might say
than
Garrett
Harrison
Wilson.
and Neighbors sounds unfair, but it's true. But that doesn't mean he's not elite.
It's not, because the other thing I took away with Rome Odunze, and at this point we're going to go through these because these are the big 3, right? And then we have some question marks for the rest, who comes in 4, but this is the big 3. And make no mistake, there is a big 3. And with Odunze, I see exactly what our amazing Nate Pulvoort was telling us on the show last week. Michael Penix is not all that. I don't know what I was watching during the college season that made me saying so wow, but I'm going back and watching those games with Washington, and Odunze should have had another 20 scores. It's similar to like what, like Marvin Harrison could have had another 10 scores if Kyle McCord was a good quarterback, and even Malik Neighbors could have more scores if Jane Daniels hit a few more throws, although it was still significantly better than those other 2. But yeah, Odunze could have had an even more bigger year, honestly. There were a lot of missed opportunities. And when you see things like that, when you see bread left on the table through no fault of the wide receiver, you have to wonder, how is this guy's ceiling higher than I think it is? And it might be for Rome Odunze. So that'll be very fun.
I think it's like I say, I think he's an elite prospect. It's just that he's in a class with 2 super elites. Like, you're basically talking Harrison and Neighbors Harrison is like either your Julio Jones or Calvin Johnson, and Neighbors is basically Tyreek Hill. It's how do you value that kind of player? A bigger Tyreek Hill. So
that's the nuts thing, is that you can keep calling him Tyreek Hill and it's fair, right? It's a good comp. It matches.
I do not throw that comp out lightly.
No, of course not, because we're not fitting him into the mold here, because he's 6'200". How tall is Tyreek? Hold on. And I gotta say, he plays bigger than 6'200".
He's 5'10", 5'11".
Yeah, Tyreek Hill being 5'10". I'm not getting his weight from Google. This is quite disappointing. He's 5'10", 185. So we're talking 2 inches less, 15 pounds less, and he runs awfully similar. And I really thought he was taller than 6 foot, Malik Neighbors. I gotta say, he is awesome.
I think that's probably about right.
No, I'm sure it will be, because very few people measure higher than they actually are listed. But he'll be fun. But I mean, there's like you mentioned, all 3 of these guys, all this big 3 is elite. So the real question with the combine and what we're looking for is who can separate themselves to that wide receiver 4, who can be the wide receiver 6, who can jump a tier, who can jump around. So I'm curious on which of these on which guy you're watching to make that jump. You have a lot of guys in that wide receiver 4 slot of, you got Franklin, you got, oh my goodness, for some people,
Coleman,
Roman Wilson, you got Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, all the others in this class with question marks, but talent. So I'm curious on which one you're looking for the most.
Yeah, so a couple of guys I listed on the sheet. Ladd McConkey, we talked about with Nate last week. He compared him to Cooper Kupp, which play style is fair. Like, he's much smaller than Cooper Kupp. He's not that big. So I want to see what he measures. If he's like considerably smaller, that's going to be an issue. Troy Franklin, I want to see his 40 time, because again, I want to confirm that that's what we should like. He's a big kind of speed outside boundary X receiver who is very fast, who we expect to be very fast. So I want to see that 40 time to confirm that he has that kind of long speed. Another Washington receiver besides Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, who I think is a really kind of superior route runner, but I don't think he's going to test super well. So that goes back to like Devontae Adams, who ran like a 4.56 or something like that, or like it was really high, just not something that would almost be disqualifying for a wide receiver in the 40, but he had kind of elite shuttle times, 3 cone and stuff like that. So yeah, I want to see how he tests, because I think I think he, like Michael Penix, was pretty decent at throwing like long sideline balls, kind of really struggled in the middle of the field, especially. So yeah, you talk about Roma Dunze leaving scores on the field. I think Jalen Polk left at least as many scores on the field. So he's a guy I think is kind of flying under the radar. I think he's just really savvy, really smart route runner. And Xavier Worthy, I want to see out of Texas. How big is he? Right, he's super fast. He's a jitterbug, but he's really small. So yeah, I want to see what he measures. He had some drops. So yeah, is that something can be corrected? Yeah, this is like, I want to see the interview. We're never going to hear what the interviews turn out, but I like, if I was a coach, I'd say, why did you have so much trouble holding onto the ball? I want to know if he knows, if it's something he can work on.
Yeah, and someone that question will be asked, and
with stuff we're not going to hear about.
Of course, yeah, and we'll hear it leaked, and we'll have to honestly guess whether that leak is genuine or just put out by somebody to impact his draft stock for their team's benefit. So we never really know. But Xavier Worthy, despite being a junior, has been that guy that we've been looking at for quite some time as a draft prospect, ever since that breakout season as a freshman, or as a redshirt. Yes, I guess second year, first playing year, when he almost had 1,000 yards at Texas. So I am so excited to see Xavier Worthy and how he gets valued, because those guys that started off as really good prospects, they still hold a lot of value, even if they don't take that extra step. Right. And I think it's fair to say Xavier Worthy didn't take the top 5 jump that we expected him to see in his class. When we started, we would have expected him to finish as a top 2 receiver. And, he's probably not going to be a top 4. He could be 4, but we don't know. So this is huge.
I think that brings up a good point, is once we get past the big 3, it's going to be kind of flavor of the month. It's going to be, who do the guys who are making those picks, or guys or girls or whoever, who do the teams that are making those picks, like in fantasy drafts, in dynasty rookie drafts, who do they like? Because I mean, you could see that order, like the guys we talked, the Colemans, the Franklins, the Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy's probably in that mix. McConkey's in that mix. Roman Wilson. I don't think Johnny Wilson's in that mix, but you could, like, those six or 7 players could go in literally any order in your draft. It's going to be how much do you view them? How much do you like them?
Yeah. And that's where those guys who have established pedigree a while ago, they'll win some fans by having that pedigree, and they'll lose some fans by never, on paper, taking that next jump. I will say Johnny Wilson's going to be an insufferable name this week. Not that I'm anti him. I have to dive more into him I watched a lot of FSU over the last 2 years, but if someone's going to crush the combine, it's going to be Johnny Wilson.
I mean, it's a guy who, if he tests like super amazing at his size, basically you're talking about another Christian Watson, right? Because Christian Watson was a 99th, like the 6th or 8th best testing overall athletic score wide receiver of all time in the discussion with Calvin Johnson. Just getting into that discussion makes you got to pay attention. Yeah. If Johnny Wilson can test as well on that level at his size, like, what was it, like 6'7", something ridiculous like that?
He's listed as 6'7". He'll come in at like 6'6", but that's still 6'7".
Even if he's 6'5", right? Even if he's 6'5" and tests out of the building, then he's a guy you got to pay attention to.
Yeah, he'll be in San Francisco to replace Jawan Jennings on blocking receiver downs and be very good at it, probably. But let's see. Now, we talked about the wide receivers, and I will echo you as well that I'm very interested to see what Ladd McConkey measures in that, because that's somebody that has such a wide range of lovers and haters in the draft process right now. And we know what he does on tape, but I think physically is really where we have the most question marks, right?
Yeah,
so
very much so.
That's where the combine answers that. And that's what I like to look for, are the guys that have physical question marks, because we get answers about physical question marks at the combine to an extent. We don't get questions about can he get open if we care about that. Can he run a good route? How well does he get over his breaks? Does he give up on a play? Does he block on a play? That's answered elsewhere. But the physical question marks that Ladd McConkey, for example, has, that stuff we're going to get some resolution on in this coming week. And Carrington adds in that Ladd McConkey was cooking at the Senior Bowl, and that's what we were talking about last week's show. If you missed it, Carrington, I highly encourage you to check it out. It was a great one with Nate Polvote, where we talked about just that. He was boots on the ground and loved what he saw from Ladd McConkey. Joel here has a little bit of cold water that he throws on that fire, but we'll see. Teach the road.
I mean, he's listed at 6'185". Do you believe he's 6'185"? Do you believe either of those measurements?
I don't think he's 6 foot. So
I don't think he's 185 either.
Yeah, I think he's like 5'11", 174.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's probably closer to
slot receiver. That's
and like I said, Nate compared him to Cooper Kupp, and it's a play style comp that's legitimate. Cooper Kupp is 205, something like that.
He's a big boy.
6 foot, 6'1", 205. I mean, he's legit. And so if McConkey is 15 to 20 pounds lighter than that, it brings up legitimate questions as to how his game is going to translate to the pros.
Yeah, and that'll be the big one to watch. But moving on to tight ends now, and obviously we talked about it before, it's really kind of Bowers and again, kind of like everything else in the class. We got our star on top, then we have a lot of question marks behind him. I'm curious about this. Do you care about what Brock Bowers does?
No.
Okay. I don't either. I just want to get that out there, get that on the record that we know what Brock Bowers is. Let's not try to overthink this in any way. I don't care if Marvin Harrison runs out there and runs a 4.6 somehow. I'm still in a Marvin Harrison.
Now, if he weighs a lot less, if he weighs a lot less than he's listed, if he comes in at like 220, that's going to be a legitimate question. Now, can he block at the next level? Like Ja'Tavion Sanders is kind of the tight end too by default. Like there's people who think he's a really good blocker, and there's people who think he's a terrible blocker. So, right? Is it in the middle? Is it one or the other? It's a very weird dichotomy of people who think he's great or he's terrible. So what does he weigh? That's going to be interesting as well. But yeah, other than those two guys, like tight end is terrible this year.
Yeah, last year was the year. Last year was the time to get in on your prospects and so forth. And Carrington mentions, does Bauer's size affect his draft capital? Joel, I'll ask you this. He's listed at 6'4", 240. That sounds pretty right to me, honestly, but I'm curious on if you have to go over, under. I mean, obviously it'll be over, under, it'll be under, but if you think that's what it is, or does that affect his draft capital anyway? Let's call it real life, because he's obviously 7-1.
If that's close, then no, it does not at all. If, like I said, if he comes in and he's way under that, if he's
220, 225,
6'1.5", and he's 220, 225, yeah, now you're going to have legitimate questions. If he comes in, he's 6'2 7/8", and he's 235. No, that doesn't change anything. And I think that's probably what people are going to expect.
Yeah, I'd like to see him come in at no less than 235, but we'll see. But the other thing to remember as well is that, and I don't have the numbers to back this up, but I'm almost 100% sure this is true, and I'm sure Joel will know because he knows all. But almost every player gains significant weight during the summer when they're doing significant training. So all these weights that we're hearing in February, they will all go up in some degree. So someone starting at 240 as a tight end could be playing at 250 on the next level.
Play weight is a big deal. We talked about, and I'll go off onto the defensive end just because, like, Nate Wiggins is a cornerback from Clemson. Like, it's a dynasty show, but I'll just use him as an example. He's listed at 6'2", 185. Like, I put on Twitter a couple weeks ago, that dude is 8th grade cross country runner skinny. There is no way he's 185. Like, he's closer to 165. He played at closer to 165 than 185. There is no way he is 185. There is zero junk in that trunk. Like, his calves are as big as my forearms, and that's not that big, right? So what does he weigh? What's his actual weight? Because, and here's the deal. Does it change the fact that he was a good cover corner in college? No, it doesn't at all. He's a good player. But if he's legit 175 or 180. I mean, he's below a lot of teams' thresholds, like, because 185 is like right at the threshold for a lot of teams at cornerback.
Yeah.
So if he's below that threshold, now it just limits what he can do, right? Can he play press against AJ Brown or DK Metcalf? No, because he's going to get ragdolled. Can he give you run support? Can he tackle on a bubble screen to the outside? Probably not. He's going to get blocked into oblivion. Can he hold up at the catch point? Right? Is he just going to get ragdolled by bigger receivers? So it really matters. Like, what, it doesn't change the fact that he's a good player. It's just that he's going to, if he comes in well below that, and his actual is well below that, teams are just going to look at him differently. And there's going to be teams like right now, he's probably a top 15 prospect. If he comes in at like 175, those teams may not see him that way. Yeah. Now it takes a bunch of teams may take him off the board entirely. A bunch of teams may say, okay, he's a nice player, but he doesn't fit our scheme. He doesn't fit. Like, the Packers brought in Jeff Hafley, and he, at his press conference the other day, said, I want guys who are going to press. I want to play press, press at the line. He doesn't work, right? He can't do that. So and as much as the Packers kind of need secondary help and need a corner, if he's 175, they're going to say he's not what we need that, but he's not what we need. So he's a guy who could slide from a top 15 prospect to maybe second round.
Yeah. And those slides will happen both on offense and defense. And these combine metrics, they can help us see them coming in a way. Because again, like you said, somebody with, all I'm hearing when you mention undersized or underweight cornerback, I'm imagining the number one thing I think I put down from Malik Neighbors, and I'll read it word for word. Teams, Capitals, need a big, strong, fast cornerback to cover. I don't think that if someone doesn't jam Malik Neighbors immediately, you're over. It's over. And then Marvin will dissect you at any point of the field. But they're awesome. I can't believe we're going to get to watch those guys more. That's fun. That's fun, Joel. But yeah, and like someone like that, I don't think they stand a chance against those types of guys, or let alone the modern day Julios, the Devontae Adams of the world, the big separators, the Cooper Kupps, that takes them off the field. So therefore it takes them off the board. So we're going to see that with some guys. And, you might see a tight end come in overweight, and that could do the same. It might view him as just a inline blocker, and that removes versatility, which removes draft value. You might see a running back come in undersized, which means maybe he can't be the bell cow or the power back, the early down runner that the team wants him to be. And they already have a auxiliary James Cook type of situation. They want more of a stronger guy. It takes them off the board. So all those measurements really do matter, and we're going to be obviously diving into the results of that next week to an extent. But all that's going to be fun to watch, Joel. Twitter is going to be unbearable.
We've got boots on the ground, right? We've got Joe Zolo is going to be there. We've got Wendy Early representing women in fantasy football. We're going to have a bunch of people there in Indianapolis. So yeah, stay tuned to Club Fantasy, because we are going to have people on site looking at these, answering our questions for us. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you want, right? Listen, we can conjecture from my room up here, but like boots on the ground, that's what you want. So be sure to check out clubfantasyffl.com to make sure you get all of that in there. Now, Joel, I know you had a few trades that you got in here, and I'd like to get to them real quick. We'll run through them. So starting with your first one here, as I pull it up into a banner, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase for the 103, 104, 107, 203. We are starting off with a spicy one here. How much does the stack matter?
You tell me if I'm insane. I turned this down. I was offered Burrow and Chase for 103, 104, 107, and the 203. Am I insane? Before I give you any context, am I insane?
No, you're not insane. You know why you're not insane? You're not insane because I don't trade as a matter of just my own basis. I never trade that level of top tier talent without knowing I have a sure thing in return. Or in theory, all rookies could bust. That's possible.
Well, I was offered Burrow and Chase and turned it down.
Oh, you were offered Burrow and Chase. Yeah, you're insane. Yeah, you're nuts. And I get it, But yeah, I would have taken Burrow and Chase for this. But I completely understand the difficulty.
Context, I don't need a quarterback. I have Richardson, I have Jordan Love, I have a third quarterback, I think, like a Derek Carr level third quarterback. I don't need a quarterback. So Joe Burrow is not as valuable to me as somebody who needs a quarterback would be. Let's say that.
Yeah.
I just don't, and the answer I gave to this manager is I don't want to give away that level of flexibility right now. Could I do this deal maybe on draft day? Maybe. Joe Burrow is not as valuable to me as he would be to some other team. So and we talked about Neighbors. I can get Neighbors at 103 pretty easy. Like I fully believe, I kind of looked at the layout of the teams that are ahead of me. I think one is really going to need a quarterback. So Caleb Williams is going to go. And I think the 102 has two really good quarterbacks. So I think Marv is good. So I think it's going to be Caleb, Marv 102. If I can get Malik Neighbors and
Jaden Daniels, Drake May, whatever.
Yeah, I can get, let's say I can take Neighbors at 3, and that's probably pretty close to Jamar Chase. A tier below, but it's not.
It's below
it's
Jamar Chase. Listen,
it's below.
it's
below. It's a tier below, but it's comparable, right? It's not way out to lunch. Now I've got 104 I can play with because I don't need a quarterback, right? I can move that around. I've got 107, whatever falls. If it's a Dunze, if it's Bowers, I mean, it's not any premium, so I'm not going to value Bowers super highly. But man, that's a lot of flexibility to give up. It's a lot of kind of draft day wheeling and dealing that I can do that may be able to net me more than Burrow and Chase, especially because, like I said, I have quarterbacks. Burrow is not as valuable to me as he would be to someone who needs a quarterback.
Yeah, and ultimately that's what it comes down to, right? Is I didn't know the roster, and if you don't need a quarterback like badly, then yeah, it's okay to pass on a Joe Burrow type of guy when you're giving up as much as you are, and especially in Superflex 103 to 107, especially having a back-to-back of 103 to 104, where you control that area, especially when you know who the first two picks are going to be. I do wager you can probably get a good bidding war for that 104. You can take Neighbors, and then if you don't want to take a Jane Daniels type of rushing upside, somebody will be chomping at the bit to get Jane Daniels in every rookie league, I think. Assuming.
And the other thing is, the 104 is the pick I traded Sam Howell for. So this is like, those entrepreneurs who like frame their first dollar bill or their first check they ever get. Yeah. I want to hold on to that pick and see what I can do.
That's also fair. We care about emotion here. Josh adds in. Then swap one of those picks for one of your quarterbacks and get the elite players.
I mean, that's a reasonable thing to do. I don't like trading out of elite quarterbacks once I have them.
Yeah,
we've talked about that. So I don't, I don't want to give up something to go from Anthony Richardson to Joe Burrow because Anthony Richardson could be as valuable or more valuable than Joe Burrow.
Yeah, Josh, get out of here, says Joel. That's what
I mean. That's a perfectly reasonable take.
I know.
It's just, it's not the way I like to operate. So
yeah. And we let's go a couple more. 12 teams Superflex start 10, 1 point tight end premium. CeeDee Lamb for the CeeDee Lamb and the 412, I guess. For the 102, 202, 302, I'll take CeeDee Lamb in a heartbeat. Not a heartbeat. Maybe not a heartbeat. I'll take CeeDee Lamb ever so slightly, but I feel like you're going to be on the side of the picks.
I was offered Lamb and turned it down again. Another one I turned down because I'm 100% certain I'm getting Marv at 102 because the team at 101 has literally nothing at quarterback. So they almost have to. Now they could trade out of that pick. Things can happen, but all things being equal, I expect to be able to get Marvin Harrison at that pick. He's probably close in dynasty value to Lamb to where he's giving up the one like 412. 412 is basically
I was laughing.
That's fab money. It's like, why even throwing that in? So the 202 is gonna be a valuable pick, right? And we talked about how once you get past those top three receivers, it's all going to be kind of flavor of the month. So the 14 is going to be a pick that has somebody's going to like it, whether it's me or someone else. Somebody's going to want that pick.
My brain tells me that you're right. because we all view Marvin Harrison as a can't miss type of prospect, which, with that mindset of him having the high ceiling that he has. And like I agree with you that he's in a similar tier to Lamb already, despite Lamb being a top 3 receiver in the NFL and in fantasy football. I get it that you get the extra second, you get the extra third to take those dart throws. It's hard.
It was hard. It was hard to turn down, right?
Yeah,
because I can say I want the flexibility, but is that flexibility going to get me more than CeeDee Lamb? Maybe not. Probably not. I don't know. That may be the best I get for it, but I'm going to take my chances that I can do more with those picks, and maybe even just making those picks will be as valuable as CeeDee Lamb.
Now, obviously, Marvin Harrison is going to be great wherever he goes, but it might take time if it's bad location. So let's say in theory, Marvin Harrison ended up with the Patriots at 3, and their quarterback room is mostly unchanged. Maybe they had a veteran journeyman type of situation. Would you have rather had CeeDee Lamb at this point?
So here's my big picture on landing spot. If these guys, and we talked about this with Bijan Robinson last year, if these guys are the elite prospects we expect them to be,
yeah, we don't care.
They are landing spot independent. Doesn't matter.
Right.
I don't care. I don't care where Marvin Harrison goes. He is a transformational player. The offense will revolve around him. Now, so another point on this team earned the 102, right? It was a bad team. As an orphan, I took over a pretty bad team. I value the depth on this team more than, obviously, because I have the 202, 302, right? This team earned those picks. The depth is going to be important. I don't have enough. CeeDee Lamb doesn't transform me from where I am into, a contending team by himself.
Yeah. And Josh does add that, this is where Ryan's influence rubs off on him. What a pick could be has proven nothing. Lamb is a dog. Go get Lamb. And Carrington actually adds a better point, although Josh just said that does change things. So maybe you've talked him into it. And Carrington adds a good point too. You can't have a team called CD's Nuts without Lamb. So you obviously have to keep Lamb, because that is team names are top priority. And that's not even
absolutely fair.
Yeah, 100%. Good to see Easy B making it in here.
What's up, Easy?
Running through a few trades right now. 12 teams to reflect start 10.75 10 premium, because I guess, one would just be too simple for you, Joel.
So it's a 1.75, yeah.
It's a 1.75, yeah. Kyler Murray and Mark Andrews for Jordan Love, Christian Watson, the 108. I will take Kyler Murray and Mark Andrews without a second of a thought. And that's where we differ again.
Well, again, context. This was a team I took over that was in it was a dispersal, a very weak dispersal. So like Kyler Murray and Mark Andrews are literally the only assets that this team had. Right. So again, I'm splitting into multiple assets. And now this was kind of expecting that JJ McCarthy is going to get that top 10 draft capital, and that 108 is going to be a valuable pick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more so me, us. We very much differ on what Christian Watson is. I think that's kind of the difference,
and that's fair.
Yeah,
but in this deal,
he's definitely the worst piece of the bunch.
Yeah, he's the I need volume. This team needs additional assets, so he's the additional asset in this trade. So yeah, this trade was not about getting Christian Watson. It was about,
of course,
I can flip Kyler Murray for a similar quarterback, one that I hold in higher regard than Murray, but they're close. And I'm cashing Andrews for 2 assets. And I think the 108 is probably in a 1.75. Bowers is not going to get to 108.
No,
but the 108 is still going to be a very valuable in that Bowers is probably a top 4 pick in that format, right? He probably goes before May and or Daniels. He might be a top 3 pick. So rising tide lifts all boats, right? It's going to push the value of those picks down. So the 108 is a valuable pick. So I'm okay needing additional assets, splitting Andrews into Watson and the 108 and taking the upside flyer.
Carrington asks how many dynasty teams you have because of how many amazing trades that you are able to offer this show. Because I won't lie, mine are a lot less active than that. Although I did get a few offers that I'll pull up in a second, but go on.
It's in the 70s. I don't know the exact number.
Oh, really? Good. How did I not know that? I didn't know that, but good.
Basically, a couple of years ago, I had a very very good luck in the playoffs, made a decent amount of money on my dynasty teams and just kind of reinvested it, just went full portfolio, just bought up a bunch of orphans. So I've reached we've talked about this. I have reached my capacity. It's just Sunday mornings are just way too stressful trying to get lineups submitted and stuff like that. So, and getting waivers done on Tuesday, keeping track of what days waivers go. So yeah, I've reached capacity on the number of teams I can manage, and I probably need to drop a few.
You have to add that his wife, the wife said that 13 is too many. Which honestly,
child's play.
Yeah, I think I'm at like I'm not even at 10. So yeah, I'm behind, I guess. But you did add one other follow-up trade in there, 108 and 113 for Brock Purdy, Khalil Herbert, Aaron Jones, Isaiah Pacheco, Sky Moore, and Alec Pierce. And that is the depth that you might be asking for if you took this, but I'm guessing I don't think you did.
I did.
Oh, you just so we are not on the same page today. We are not at all on the same page.
So I was offered the 108 and 113 for Purdy, and I'm like, I don't want to split two. Like, again, we just talked. This is the same deal as the Jordan trade. Again, I said I don't. It's fair value, I think, but I don't want to split. I'm not in a position to be unsplitting, and turning two assets into one. So they came back with all this, which is pretty decent amount of excess value. Like Aaron Jones, Isaiah Pacheco are valuable pieces. Like Moore, Pierce, Herbert. Herbert could be, but
Moore and Pierce.
He doesn't push the needle. It's just too much excess value. Like, and the other thing is, I don't have my 25 first in. I have another 25 first, but not mine. So I don't care if I end up in the middle of the pack. I just want to add assets that I can potentially flip later in the season.
Yeah, no, I like this. For the record, like I thought you might decline it, but I like this type of deal. And I think it's a terrific buy on Brock Purdy for, not that much for somebody that is.
Yeah, I think 108 and the 113 is a sandwich pick, right? It's one of those picks that the winner of the toilet bowl gets. So yeah, I think 108 and 113 for Purdy is fair value. I just I didn't want to do that because like the team does not have enough assets. I shouldn't be going 2 for 1 in the other direction. But once you throw all that stuff on, I'm getting additional assets that I can play with, and now I can feel a functional team. Then I kind of had to take it.
Yep. And the one other trade I'll throw in here, because it's pretty much the only offer I've got over the last month, and mine are shot down, and most likely rightfully so. 12-team, no tight end premium, no super flex. I know, less fun, but Kyle Pitts for a 25 first and a second. This was made to me a month ago.
As much as I like Kyle Pitts in a non-tight end premium, I'm not giving up a first for him.
I held Kyle Pitts for this. So see, Now look at this. We are on such different opposite ends of the spectrum today. It's so fascinating. But yeah, I decided to hold Kyle Pitts for this, and my thinking is, I have no idea where that first is going up, and in one quarterback, no tight end premium, if that ends up being a mid to late first, I could really be regretting that. And then the second thought process being, Atlanta has to get the quarterback right. They have to get the quarterback right because this team could be so good. This team could be so ridiculously good. And I'm not willing to call it quits on Kyle Pitts. I've been looking up the numbers yet again just to convince myself of him being open and him being open downfield, but he's simultaneously 35th in catchable targets and 32nd in target quality, or vice versa. I might have mixed them up, but regardless, dead last in the league on metrics that have literally nothing to do with him and everything to do with Desmond Ridder. So I don't regret turning it down, but that was my thought process. My other tight end is Devin, if that matters.
In that case, I definitely would have done it. In a non-tight end premium, I just don't know how valuable Kyle Pitts is. So in that case, I'll take the certainty of getting a first for him. And I love Kyle Pitts as a player. Like, I'm still in on him fully. This is a tight end premium, non-tight end premium argument for me more than an evaluation of Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. And I also think it's going to be somewhat of I also think his value is destined to grow. I think we are going to see his value swing up.
I expect that to be the case.
Yeah. Karen just saying Ritter's the guy. Arthur Smith even said now Arthur Smith is in Pittsburgh and everything's ruined. So it doesn't matter anyway. But yeah, I'm hoping that there is at least one more upswing in Kyle Pitts' value, and obviously I hope many to come, given that I turned down that capital for him.
And I think it's Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. I'm starting to come around on that.
I just want competent quarterback play. I want to see how good that team can be, because I think it could be really, really good. I thought they could have been really good this past year, but Desmond Ridder is just that bad, so it doesn't matter. Either way, that wraps up our show. We went well over the hour to prepare you guys for the Combine week, and I ramble. I'll take responsibility for that, Joel. That's on me.
It's all good.
But
it's not like there's games today. What else are we doing?
Yeah, exactly.
What
else are we supposed to do on a Sunday other than the Dynasty After Party?
There's no games today. Not even a Pro Bowl.
No, not even a Pro Bowl. Well, we get the Combine coming up, and that'll be enough for us to hold us into free agency and all the good stuff to come with that as we talk about that on the coming shows next Sundays and all that. So be sure to follow Joel here at the Joel Wirth on Twitter. Follow myself at Michael__Sicoli. And you can, of course, follow Club Fantasy FFL at Club Fantasy FFL. And as Joel mentioned before, boots on the ground, our beloved Joe Zolo. And sorry, who was going for Winter Fantasy Football?
I know Wendy Early's going. There were a couple others that I don't remember off the top of my head. I apologize.
We're going to have a bunch. We have a convoy. Convoy. We have a convoy of Club Fantasy FFL people heading on down there. So be sure to check out clubfantasyfl.com to be checking out all that content and following on social media at the same handle to, get firsthand, be boots on the ground yourself as much as you
Hopefully
can.
Solo will actually tweet what he sees.
Yeah, that would also be nice.
He's not super active on Twitter, but let's hope we actually
either his takeaways will be known on shows or
we'll see him on Wednesday, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see him around as you all know in NPI. So either way, we'll be jumping into all that and the results of the Combine next week on the next Dynasty After Party. So thank you all for tuning in. It's been a blast. Hope everyone has a good week. So remember, Dynasty is like a disco ball, keeps on spinning year round. So join the club every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern right here with Club Fantasy. Stay healthy, stay safe. Have a good Sunday.